Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is level 2 presentation, February 1st, 2018, lesson 3 of our 2018 semester. And what I'm going to talk about in this presentation is the idea of non-duality and this shape embodying non-duality so that we can transcend that level of consciousness. So in level 1, I was speaking extensively about we are on this journey. We are right now transforming from caterpillar to butterfly. It is a quantum leap, not just a cool catchphrase, but an actual manifestation of the idea of moving from one level of experience to the next level of experience. And we need to do it as one leap. It can't be done incrementally. And when we make that leap, we recognize we have that realization of each one of us being God. I am God. Not a loud thing driving by outside. Okay, so this whole idea of good versus evil, in just the same way that mostly when you're a little kid, you learn about death, you learn about aging and decrepitude and illness. Let me just also move this lamp because as I do the webinars, the sun goes down and the lighting in here changes. Okay, hold on, we got a question before I even get going. Okay, Joelle says, everyone say hi to my friend Kelly. She just joined the class for the first time. Hello, Kelly, and welcome. So yeah, all right, good. You're getting lasagna fight. So first of all, this is your first Flying Rainbow Lasagna class. It means that you're being exposed to new ideas and that your DNA is going to start dancing in new patterns. And that's really wonderful. As you dance in new patterns, it's like being able to erase the things out of your DNA that you don't want to be there and write in new things that you do wish to be there. It's empowerment and also personal responsibility. And it means that you can rearrange the events of your life. Transforming your DNA doesn't just mean changing your eye color. Like, you know, something, if you want to change your eye color, like, man, you can get some colored contact lenses. That's a lot easier and more direct than, you know, you just pay some money for it. This takes a lot of focus, a lot of concentration, a lot of energy work, a lot of determination. You have to practice. It's like learning to play the violin or something like that. It's not just a way for you to change your physical appearance. It is, however, a way for you to transform your experience of flying through time, which is something that you cannot simply do by purchasing colored contact lenses. It means that you get to write the story of your life as opposed to have some external entity or social cultural pattern dictate to you what the journey of your life should be like. All right, so in terms of non-duality, I use this little yellow sculpture all the time. It's getting more and more delicate as it gets more and more broken. That this is the precursor of this. This is like the shape that we start off with, and this is the shape that we transform into. And it is that central convergence point that I'm pointing to right here, that point in the middle that's the singularity, or the zeroth dimension, or the source of all consciousness, organizing principle. It's the presence of everything. It's infinity. It's everything that is there. And when we take this and we make it jump up and down in a higher dimensional state, it turns into this. And now I'm going to get my picture that's worth 1,000 words. So this is a, hold on a second. I'm trying to do too many things at once. Thank you for bearing with me, guys. You can tell when my brain is on overload and I'm trying to do too many things at once. You're all very understanding and I really appreciate this. So this is a still shot from the level 2 recordings, from the recorded lessons. So again, I encourage everyone to enroll because I feel like I do a good job in those recorded lessons of presenting everything in a linear fashion that makes good sense, and I don't have to rush in order to get all of the ideas out in, you know, the limited time that I have in class. So this drawing, this little sketch over here, what we've got is, I'm going to draw in black. Here we've got a cross section, just like I've drawn in the past, and this is the advanced class, so you all know exactly what I'm talking about. That's the cross section of one torus. And now I'll get a different color, and we'll make another cross section up here. Alrighty, so now let's say that there are 2 positions in this drawing. One position is the red position, and one position is the black position. But these 2 positions are different positions of the same thing. It's both, those are both cross sections of this yellow toroidal shape, and half of the time it's in the black position down at the bottom of the screen, and half of the time it's in the red position in the upper part of the screen. And when it's in the lower position, it creates here, let me get a different color, it creates this part of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And it creates that part with the energy that is flowing around this shape, this half vortex. You can see, let's see if I do a different color. If I extended this, you would see that there's a whole vortex there. Look, there's a big fat vortex there. But when I make the Flying Rainbow Lasagna happen, this is a half vortex on half of that shape, because what then happens is the entire yellow sculpture jumps up to the red position. And when it jumps up to the red position, that is when we have the next part of the shape of the flying rainbow lasagna created that highlights that half vortex. And it is a jumping up and down at least 8 times in order to create the flying rainbow lasagna shape. So on this still shot, you can see many different two-dimensional representations of the flying rainbow lasagna from various different viewpoints. And it's always, we've got 8 flanges or 8 portions of this shape. And I'll return to my sculpture here so you can see it. Here, I'll count around with you like a clock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that is how we do this basic genetic dance. It is a jumping up and down, superpositioning. Superpositioning in the quantum world means something that can be 2 things at one time, and we're going to get into non-duality. So half of the time, or a certain proportion of the time, this shape is down here, and then it moves up here, and then it moves down here. And as it's doing that, it is rearranging the possibilities of reality, because the possibilities when the shape is in this position are like a certain amount of variables, a certain song in the time field. And up here, it's a different song with slightly different notes. And that jumping up and down means that we can do a mashup, a mixing together like your favorite DJ does of 2 different songs, or like the Beastie Boys. They use a little bit of this and then throw in a little bit of this. You can do a mashup between whatever. Here's some Mozart and here's some Jimi Hendrix, and we are going to mix those notes together to make an entirely new song. That's what flying rainbow lasagna is. So now back, rewinding into the idea of duality. So our biological architecture gives us, it defines us as dualistic beings on a very basic level. And being in a material body defines us as dualistic beings also. So first I'll go to biology. We have eye versus eye. Most people are binocular, and we have binocular vision. We have 2 eyes. And what our brain and our system of perception does is it calculates the tiny differences between the viewpoint from one eye and the viewpoint from the other eye, and then builds a 3-dimensional version of reality based upon those 2, and this is, we had to learn to see as little tiny infants. You come here, your eyesight is not perfect, and you can't really focus that effectively, and it takes time to learn how to build a 3-dimensional understanding to render an environment around ourselves of understanding depth, of understanding where things are. And this is like when you're a little kid, like you learn like how to catch a ball or how to, how to touch something. This is what you're doing. You're learning to calibrate your dualistic perception. And it goes beyond merely eye versus eye. It also goes down to contrast. On the retina of our eye, we have these sensitive cells like photosensitive paper. The retinal cells that are sensitive, the way that they perceive is by comparing brightness through contrast. So basically, if you use my ear as the example, the retina cells of your eye make a contrast between the light part, here's my earlobe, which is a relatively light part that's reflecting a lot of light, and this part over here, this is dark, and it makes an edge, makes a hard-edged object, where our eyes are actually biologically created to define a difference between this thing and this thing over here. Dualistic opposition, thing versus thing, all right? So we have brightness and contrast, eye versus eye, and then we also have, wait, a little bit more, light and matter. So we are material beings. I have a material body. You also all have material bodies. These material bodies are made out of light that is slowed down to move slower than the speed of light. So now if I draw this all out, let's draw the sun. Here's this big red guy over here. This is the sun. The sun is emitting these wonderful photons that go forward like this. And if I didn't do anything ever, this photon would just continue going infinitely in that direction. But what if this photon hits a planet? Now let's draw Earth over here. What if this photon coming out of the sun, instead of going endlessly on its journey, it hits the planet, and maybe it does something like gets captured by a leaf in the process of, photosynthesis with chlorophyll, or maybe it bounces off of an object and bounces into here. Now I'm going to draw a human eyeball. Here, there's your eye. Ooh, that's a really funny looking eye with eyelashes up on top. Maybe it bounces into a human eye. And if this photon bounces into a human eye, then it stimulates your brain. Here's your red curly brain back here. It makes a neurological stimulation in your brain, but it doesn't continue onward here where it would have been if it hadn't interacted with your eye or with a leaf or with any other thing that's on the surface of the planet. So the whole idea is we are solidifying light over here. We're slowing it down. We're preventing it from moving onward, onward, onward into the future or onward on its journey. We're slowing it down and making it coalesce. And when you make something coalesce, you then have a deficit. So we have stuff over here that is where there's no light, and that is called the shadow. And now this is like art class. Wait, let me draw something. So here's like a sphere, and I'll make lines of latitude and longitude so that you can very basically perceive that it's a sphere. And it's just floating in space. Look, it's floating on my page. I'm an art teacher. Hey, that apple's just floating. It's not actually sitting down on the table. Now let's make it actually sit down in reality. We put a shadow next to it. And as soon as you put a shadow next to it, wow, look at how that works with your little system of perception. Now we have a sphere that is sitting on a table. It's in a context, it's in a place. So the whole idea is that just by having matter, we have solidified light that is concentrated into one place, but then we also have light that is not where it's supposed to be or where it could have been if it weren't interacted with. We have shadow. We have light versus shadow. Look, just like my earlobe, light versus shadow. I versus I, this is all duality. And so we have this heavily dualistic biology that then gets translated into a dualistic cosmology. Cosmology meaning story, narrative structure of where consciousness comes from. So just like I was talking about in level 1, your little kid, we have all these questions, mommy, daddy, like where's death? Where did the goldfish go? Where did it go bye-bye? Where did grandma go? We have questions when you get to a certain point about God. Mommy, daddy, if God is real and God is good, then how can good and evil both be subsets of God? And then mommy and daddy have to figure out some way to describe this. You know, it's like it's something that's illogical. It doesn't actually make sense. But it does make sense if we understand that all of these dualistic opposites fall under the heading of this totality. So now we're going to get into flying rainbow lasagna. When I invented this shape, I invented it as the solution to duality, not in order to create more duality. So I'm going to explain this, and this is the advanced class, and everybody can take this subtle, you guys can all deal with subtleties, and you're not going to, smash this down into too much simplification and lose the subtleties of it. And that's what I'm always most concerned about, that someone will look at this shape and be like, look, it's just like good versus evil in endless dualistic opposition, which is not my intention with this shape. This shape is made when this shape vibrates back and forth into two, different positions. Just like I have I1 and I2, that this shape has position 1 and position 2. But in exactly the same way that this eye doesn't see the exact same viewpoint of the room as this eye does, this shape has a different viewpoint of reality when it's down here than when it is up here. So jumping back and forth between these two positions in reality means jumping back and forth between two different viewpoints. And those two different viewpoints can have different qualities, like energy and entropy. So now let's say viewpoint 1 and viewpoint 2 are in the embodiment of energy and entropy. And I'll go back to my picture, and we'll use the picture for more explanation. Squinting and squirreling. Energy and entropy. So let's say this guy down here, I did black before, this black position, let's say that is the position of entropy. And let's say that this red position, once again, is the position of energy. And we could say energy is heat, it is movement, it is intelligence, it is organization. It is, when I was talking about that journey of consciousness that we continue on endlessly, it is the endless, frictionless, perpetual motion machine of our consciousness moving, to infinity, endlessly moving to infinity. And what the entropy position would be the opposite of all of that. Instead of heat, it is coldness, it's frozenness, it's lack of movement. When I've spoken in the past in this class about what is entropy, I say if I took all of the energy out of the room that I'm in, all the little molecules that are moving around that are keeping my room warm, or exhibiting as a symptom that my room is warm, those molecules don't move anymore. So those molecules stop moving, they stop moving through time. We can say that this is the area of no longer being aware, no longer moving through time, and that this is the area of being aware and of moving through time. So guys, let me rewind. That is exactly like when I'm always drawing in the time field. Here, we'll use this area over here. I always draw this blue time vortex, right? And I say, this timeline that's going up to infinity, and all of this place where I'm making blue squiggles, that is where life is supposed to be. Life, moving through the time field, timelines and beings and material matter experiencing movement through time. And that this red zone, the membrane of death that I'm highlighting right now, that is supposed to be the place of frozen entropy. No movement, no consciousness, no awareness, no sense of self, nothing, non-being, that is supposed to be the area of non-being. So what I have two different representations now drawn on this screen between, let's say, I should have done it in a different way, with different colors. Let's make this area on this drawing, this black area is the membrane of death. That is the cold, dead area where there's not supposed to be life and movement and heat. And now I'm going to draw in red. This is the ultimate timeline of movement. That is the movement area. And all this stuff that I'm highlighting in red, this is also movement, even though those movements, end up being temporal. You can only move so far until you hit the membrane of death and then you hit entropy. But this is where energy is supposed to be. This is where time and awareness and possibilities and probabilities are supposed to be explored. And then the membrane of death is a place of deadness, of non-movement, of not moving through time. And what we have with this jumping back and forth of that singularity between these two positions, it's like right eye, left eye, this position and this position. We have energy and entropy, but it is the same being, the same consciousness that is jumping back and forth. This is what I mean when I say that I took these rules, this higher dimensional musical score, and I haven't gone against the rules, but I did bend them or amend them. That all of this is like a math proof. When you get to higher levels of math, not that I've gone to such high levels, but I'm aware of them, equations no longer look like 1 + 1 = 2. They begin to become proofs where you have statement A, statement B, statement C, and then you must come up with statement D, which does not come into conflict with any of the previously established statements. So we have all of these other statements that are going on here about the structure of time, about the structure of how energy flows, about the pathways that energy is allowed to travel in this embroidery called time, the time field. Then we say, okay, that's what you're allowed to do. This doesn't break any of those rules, but it adds a new rule. It's the solution to the proof. What if we take that singularity, that central convergence point? We don't make two singularities, but we make it jump back and forth very fast. And as it's jumping back and forth, it has different qualities. And this is a crucial distinction because some aspects of consciousness are moving towards energy, awareness, intelligence, continued life, perpetual motion. And some of them are moving in the opposite direction, not to create more duality, but they're moving away from intelligence, away from organization, into what people would define as chaos. They're becoming less organized, less aware. They're becoming frozen. They're losing their energy. And you lose your energy through friction. Like all of your internalized, verbalized thoughts, this is friction. This is why meditation and things like yoga that help you get into a meditative state help you to live longer. Stop thinking and you will live longer. Like this, that's the simple, the simplified takeaway of all of this. But yes, moving into a frictionless state equals moving towards immortality and eternal life and eternal journey of your consciousness. And we're in this refinery of consciousness. That's what this whole entire time field is. And all of our individual chakras are part of that. And what we are on the planet and what we are doing as a species, we are refining out certain characteristics, just like happens with DNA. Like if you think about mating partners, like if all women only like men who have blue eyes, then you are refining characteristics. You are saying future generations will all be babies born with blue eyes because all of the women only procreated with males that had blue eyes, blah, 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 etc. So this is the whole idea, that we're in a refinery of the entire cosmos of many different characteristics, not only of eye color, and that we are determining what are the characteristics that will continue to help us to move forward as opposed to ending our journey through entropy. Some characteristics help us to continue to fly forward, and some characteristics do not. And that's the simple part of this. When we go into abstraction, when we transcend the anthropomorphic level of interpretation, human level of interpretation, because humans might be like, wait, I like those characteristics, but they're entropic characteristics. They make you go towards entropy. And if what you're trying to do is determine, will these characteristics lead me to eternal life, or will they lead me to entropy and loss of life and loss of vitality and no longer being able to move through the time field, then you say, okay, I only want to align myself with and identify as my true self, as part of my true being, the characteristics that bring me towards endless life. And that is when we refine ourselves to become I am God, the version of your term paper that gets saved. Like you've done all of the edits on the word processing software, that you press save and send it to the professor. That's the version of you that is the eternal version that continues onward. And all of the spelling mistakes, all of the grammatical mistakes, those are all the characteristics that are not eternal, that are being refined out in this refinery process that go to the membrane of death. All of the wrong decisions that you ever made, those aren't the eternal. The part of yourself that made those wrong decisions is not eternal. That part of yourself gets to go to entropy. So it's not 50-50. It's not like 50% of the time you're moving towards energy and 50% of the time you're moving towards entropy. It's not an exact, proportion like that. But the whole idea is that this shape is saying that there are various different positions of the source, and that when the source is in certain positions, it is moving towards energy, and in other positions, it is moving away from energy. Now I have to go into the different states of matter, and I've done this many times, and if it's recap for people who have already been in the class, then let's say like it's a good opportunity to learn through re-emphasizing. So here, let's say we're starting off with solid. This is, I'll write it, solid matter. And that's like physical matter that we're familiar with. It's like a frozen cube of ice. Now let's say here's water. Water is liquid. Then we can have steam. That's the next level of water. That's gas. And then, there's not really a version of water that I can do this with. But if we get up to the next level, what we've got is plasma. Plasma is fire. So I'm kind of drawing some fire there. So that's plasma. And plasma is light waves that are going all crazy. Here's light waves going in every single different plane, every single different direction. They are disorganized light waves, like the light that is coming off of a candle flame, or the candle flame itself, that is plasma. And then if we organize those light waves perfectly so they're all coherent, then what you have is a beam of light. And that travels endlessly. There's no friction. It's a perpetual motion machine. And so these are the basic states of matter that science recognizes, moving from more dense, down here in the solid level, to less dense. But science also recognizes a state of matter that is more dense than physical matter. And I got to write it down here. I'm squinting. Bose-Einstein condensate. That is what that says. So this state of matter is called the Bose-Einstein condensate. And that is what happens when you take matter, that is, it has molecular movement due to energy, and you take all of the energy away from it. If these are little molecules, like if these are the little air molecules in my room moving around, and they're jiggling together and they're exhibiting that they have energy because they're showing movement and it makes my room feel warm. We froze my room. We made it really, really, really cold in here. All of those little molecules wouldn't be moving around anymore. They would be frozen. And if you bring them down to a state that is almost absolute zero, which is almost completely frozen, it's almost completely no movement, what happens is they start to smear on top of each other, where all of a sudden this little atom over here and this little atom over here, they kind of act like they're superimposed. And this atom gets superimposed and this atom gets superimposed until it acts like one big atom. It achieves unity consciousness at the lowest end of the spectrum. So what we have embodied in this flying rainbow lasagna shape are two different levels of unity consciousness. I'll go back to my face. This is the level of pure energy. This is what we would call God or divinity or the source. This is everyone who's like, in a simplified way. Many people are like, oh yes, when you meet a demon, just send them back to the source. That's where they came from, right? But we're in a refinery of characteristics. That might be a characteristic of that demonic presence that is not meant to travel through time. It is not an eternal characteristic. It's friction, it's baggage, it slows everything down. Maybe it's not supposed to go to entropy. Maybe it is supposed to go instead to entropy. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I said the right word. It's supposed to go not towards energy over here, but instead towards entropy, loss of energy, becoming more and more frozen until it no longer moves through time. But that doesn't mean it's like violently killed, doesn't have its head cut off. I'm like making these, gestures. We're not going to smush it, dismantle it, like it's not causing suffering is what I'm trying to say. The whole reason I invented Flying Rainbow Lasagna is because I see that this world is full of suffering, and I wanted to come up with a solution to the math proof. If blah, blah, blah is true, if A, B, and C are true, and those things are all causing suffering, what statement, D, must be true in order to end suffering? This is my solution. This is literally a math that is done in a higher dimensional format, not in Aramaic numerals, but instead in a shape that has vectors of force. And the vectors of force are the way that energy is flowing around this shape. So we have a this way type of movement around this, and we also have a this way type of movement around this. And this shape can be oriented at different angles. So, you know, when I talk about doing the flying rainbow lasagna dance, oops, sorry, I'm just putting my pen down. I talk about, and let me also just make sure that everybody's muted, not because I don't love you. There we go, just so that there's no feedback. You know, I do the flying rainbow lasagna with my DNA up and down like this, but at the same time, with some of my DNA, I'm doing it side to side like this. And with some, I'm doing it forward and backwards like this. And with some, I'm tumbling end over end like this. And that those are like different movements of that, you know, that same basic chord structure can be played in many different ways. And that every time you add a new variable, you are getting an additional degree of freedom. So this is all, all in order to say that this is the solution to how good and evil can both be subsets of divinity or unity consciousness, that we are in a refinery of characteristics. So this also speaks to this basic presumption. And so you shouldn't just send all personality characteristics to the light. Not everything belongs there. Some things actually belong in a state of total entropy, which would be considered frozenness and non-awareness. Those beings that are in unity consciousness in a Bose-Einstein condensate, they are not aware. So what we have is a jumping back and forth between awareness, sense of self, beingness, and non-being. Some things are supposed to be and some things are not supposed to be. So the things that are supposed to be are the things that continue endlessly, that will lead to that eternal journey of life. And the things that are not supposed to be are the things that lead us to entropy, that are friction, that slow us down. But even if you slow everything down, what you still do is achieve unity consciousness, but you achieve it through lack of consciousness. So these are still, they're not exactly the same, they are different. But this is how we can also understand or come to acceptance of the idea that there are those occupiers of the interstices. Those beings, they are not supposed to become highly energetic. They are not supposed to have more and more and more energy added to them until they move at a faster rate and then make that leap to the next level of consciousness. And, you know, I joke about them being turds that need to be flushed because, you know, they're so pesky, they're so annoying, we don't like them to be here. But what they really need to do is they need to go into a state of entropy, non-being, non-molecular movement, no longer moving, no longer having energy. And the whole unfairness of the system that we've been submerged within for so long is the idea that those beings of entropy have been vampiring energy off of you and me as we move through the time field, through the hacked human operating system and through distorted DNA. When you flying rainbow lasagna your DNA, you erase that. Get my pencil. You erase out the idea that they can suck energy off of you and write back in the truths that you would prefer to experience instead, where you are fully in control of your own life and no demonic beings, you know, distort your life or make you fly in the wrong direction or anything like that. So Libby, I'm also going to talk about binary really fast. Because binary is another dualistic, okay, I have a few more minutes, is another dualistic thought structure viewpoint, and it has everything to do with our digital world. Binary, this whole idea that something can be either a 1 or a 0. And so I'll just write this really fast on the whiteboard. So this was invented, you know, and it's part of computer science. With binary, we have a 1 and we have a 0. And this is non-being and this is being. And it's the idea that you can have a switch, and the switch is either off over here or the switch is on over here, and that those are the two options. But if you look at these, we've got numbers. Like over here, we've got the number 0, and over here, we've got the number 1. And if I asked anybody in this class, because you're all super smart people, hey, how many options do I have? You'd all raise your hand and say, ooh, Aurora, I know the answer. This is how many options we have. 2. We have 2 options. Look, 1, 2. So even though we only have off and on, and we have the numbers, nothingness and somethingness, what we really have are 2 options. You have the number 0 and the number 1. And if you recognize that you have 2 options, then all of a sudden you get the number 2. That what I'm trying to say is, even in the binary system, there's the implication of the next integer. I should have done it in the opposite way. I should have put 1 over here so that way I can say, then we come up with 2, and then all I have to do is keep on adding 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, just like building the dimensions that we did last week, that this is how we can transcend duality. So what we did to transcend binary was recognize, well, I've got this over here and I've got this over here, and those end up being 2 options, even though we only have integers that can count to 1. That's the whole point of binary. You've only got 1 integer. You've got 0, which is nothingness, and 1, which is somethingness, but you've actually got 2 options. And so when we say, okay, look, I've got I number 1 and I number 2, and that's creating this, version of reality that I'm looking at. But what you also have is your higher dimensional viewpoint. And this is what people call, your inner eye, or your insight, or this could be considered your Christ chakra or energy center of your body. It is the viewpoint through which the higher dimensional entity known as Christ looks. And we spoke about this in level 1. I do really believe that there was a historical Yeshua, a person that actually walked the earth and had actually come to that final denouement of recognizing their own divinity. But that's not the only person that's ever going to do it. Just like, not to self-aggrandize or anything, I'm not the only person that is ever going to do flying rainbow lasagna. Like, I invented this, but the whole idea is that it is for everyone to do. So the whole idea is that each one of us is meant to embody our own divinity on a profound level and become these great musicians and become these great collaborators with reality. And this is what so I've been in my own personal trajectory, not to get too personal here, but, for many months I've been focused on different political unfoldments, as seeing them as symptoms of burgeoning freedom on this planet. And at a certain point, I've become, let's say, a bit fatigued with focusing so much of my attention on external political realities and waiting for, a particular piece of paperwork to be signed or something like that, and then we'll all be free, with replacing that with the remembrance, like refocusing my efforts into the idea that what we really need to do is become the artists of our reality. So if one is disillusioned with the work of, fat-ass politicians in Washington, D.C., we can write a new reality that transcends and abrogates the necessity of having those politicians there. Like, maybe all of their indiscretions, their videotaped indiscretions, all of a sudden come out in a huge avalanche, and we, unravel the entire sweater of corruption, and then we have a completely different experience of reality. Literally, like, if this was your world that you were writing the narrative structure, like your screenplay, this is your movie, you're writing the narrative structure of your screenplay, then what would you write? And that's a good segue into the idea of movies and film, and also non-duality. So if you have an old-fashioned movie, like on an old-fashioned film, you have here, I'm drawing like a film strip. So this is not a digital film. Digital film functions differently, but old-fashioned movies had different frames of reality. And so here's one little frame over here, and here's the next one is, a slightly different, and then the next one is slightly different. And this is moving through time. And what we have been experiencing up until this moment is the idea of experiencing each moment, one moment per moment. Like, I'm looking at the movie as the movie is rolling by, and it has a sense of reality. But what would happen if we chopped up that entire long film strip and we put it on a big table? Like, now I'm drawing a big table that's maybe as big as a giant football field, and I'm kind of drawing a grid on it too. And you could imagine that whole entire film strip of your life, all of those moments of your life, instead of seeing them one at a time, they're all laid out on this giant football field. And where I'm putting this dot over here, that's your birth. That's where you started. And then you circulate through all these different moments, you make it up to the end, and that's your death. And when you have the higher dimensional viewpoint, now I'm drawing your eyeball, up here. Here's an eyeball up here. That eyeball is able to see this whole entire structure of your life at once. It's not like seeing it moment by moment and making decisions based upon that, or based upon, if you've only gotten up to this frame in the movie, then you're only halfway through. You can only make your decisions about what you've seen up to that moment. My dog boss has arrived. It is seeing the entire movie at once. And then you get a different viewpoint. You get a different sense of priorities, and a different sense of what you need to do. Because you might say, well, wait a minute, this thing that's going on over here when I made an X relates to this thing that's going to happen in 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 years. And you start to see how events are tied together. That is the higher dimensional, non-dualistic viewpoint. And what it really looks like, if I clear everything away, what it really looks like when you do that is, here's birth, here's like a little tiny baby, baby stick figure, and here's the present moment now. And you look down the time tunnel, going backwards through time. This is the time tunnel going backwards through birth, and you see all of these versions of self. Here's who you were a minute ago, and here's who you were a year ago, and here's who you were all the way going back to your birth. It's like I'm trying to draw like one point perspective. Like if this is the road, and the road is going into the distance, and here's the sun, and here's the mountains. It all converges backwards. So when you begin to activate your higher dimensional viewpoint, this entity Christ chakra, you become a part of that entity. You look at people as all of their layers of their life all at once, and you see down into their potential, their birth. You see backwards in time into what they've been and what they've done, and you also see forwards in time into their potential of who they will be. And this is also another way of transcending duality, of being able to understand the different layers of time that create this experience. I'm certain that there are questions. I don't know. Okay, I don't see any questions right now, but if you guys have any questions, I'm imagining that not all of this is perfectly clear, but I'm trying to make it as clear as possible. So again, to clarify, just drinking water. And let me wrap up in 5 minutes because my dog needs to go out. This shape is meant to transcend duality, not create more duality. So the thing that is jumping back and forth, it's God. It's God, it's the source, it's intelligence, it's where we all come from, it's where we are all going to, but it has different positions, it has different formats and experiences. So we're in this world, this is the solution to how do we understand good and evil? Not everything is traveling in the same direction. It's not meant to. That is real love and acceptance, means you accept not everything and not everyone is traveling in the same direction. So there are certain people and certain personality characteristics that are not eternal, and they're not traveling in the same direction as you. And guess what? A lot of these non-eternal people and non-eternal personality characteristics are very visible in our society. They're on TV screens and movie screens, and they're in your face asking for your attention all the time. And they do that because I think they know deep inside that they don't really exist. They only exist temporarily in this, like a little blip in the time field, and that they're not eternal, and that they're actually going to be erased or unmade. And that's what this whole refinery of time is all about. We keep going through different iterations and variations of possibilities of combinations of events until we find that final combination of events where each person realizes that they are a divine, eternal being, except for all of the beings or characteristics that are not divine, eternal beings. All of the beings that hit the membrane of death, all of those peripheral versions of self. So if you are seeing someone that is an axe murderer, that is not a divine, eternal being. That is a distorted version of who that person really could be. And that person in that format needs to go to entropy. They don't need to be like loved and, sent to the source. They get to be sent to the source, but at this direction over here. So again, I'm not trying to make people be like, it's not about like teams. It's not about trying to be like, are you on the energy team or the entropy team? Which direction are you going in, or any kind of thing like that. It's a refinery of consciousness. And it's like saying, what are the right notes? The right notes, the right thoughts, the right experiences in time are the notes that fit with the rest of the symphony. That is why you get to keep on being alive, because you fit with the music. If you don't fit with the music, you can't keep on being in the symphony that is called being alive, and you go into a state that is called death, that is called non-being, that is called non-awareness. And I spoke about this in level 1, the different practices that were done in order for people to try to use technology to make themselves immortal in some way. So the ancient Egyptian mummification techniques were part of that. That's not real immortality, but it might be an extension of the afterlife. And what many people are looking at now in terms of transhumanism is another form of artificial extension of consciousness. But that's not freedom. That is like being trapped and enslaved. It's not what you really want. So I'm cautioning everyone against getting yourself uploaded into some kind of virtual reality fantasy land, even if they call it Christian heaven. Like, to me, that is not freedom. That is another one of these constraint levels, just get popped into a new level of constraint. So again, people are free to choose what they want to choose, but I'm cautioning against any of the death cult religions that say you have to die first and then you'd be uploaded to a wonderful, expansive fantasy land. We should be able to be in a wonderful, expansive fantasy land while we are here on this planet, and the planet herself is transforming into that expansive state from caterpillar to butterfly. There was a comment. Okay, Patricia says, I feel like I have lived several timelines in this one life. I think that that's probably accurate, because I think that in this moment, like in this lifetime, we are doing a lot of laundry, like giant industrial sized, loads of laundry. Because what I mostly tell people is focus on who you are in this time and place, and don't focus on who you were in a past life. And we've all been everybody. And those firewalls are necessary because if you're like, oh my God, I killed someone in three lifetimes ago, then you're carrying that emotional burden and responsibility when you are, and then you are not free in this body in order to do what you need to do in this body. So in many ways, we need to say, I focus on who I am in this body and this time and place and this sense of identity. But also when you dilate your identity, then you're like, wow, I've been everyone. I've done everything. I've made all of those mistakes. So then it's a question of how to rectify, how to clean these things up, how to make all of your timelines align with that central core possibility. So let me just drink a little bit of water too. We don't have to keep on being incarnated over and over again in order to solve things, because we can now fly in rainbow lasagna. We can travel backwards in time, we can travel forwards in time, and we can constantly erase and rewrite what's happening. And that means that we can, let's say, rectify things from the past. How about this? Your DNA, as you presently are, is the distillation of everything from your ancestors, down to the present. And not everything that your ancestors did was great. Not everything that they did biologically was great, or mentally. And they might have had really screwed up cultural and social, parameters. Like they might have believed in human sacrifice, or some crazy rape culture or something like that. And you don't have to carry that onward in your DNA. You can say, like, if you're reading the book of your DNA, like I'm looking at my arm, I'm going to read the book of my DNA. You're reading this in yourself, and you're like, that's in me, that's in me, that's in me. You don't have to keep that in you. A lot of that stuff is like, oh, that was handed down to you. That's what you got. Like a tendency towards disease, a tendency towards chronological aging, and then all this ancestral baggage. And you don't have to pass that on. You don't have to pass it on to any possible children that you might procreate and produce, and you don't have to pass it on in terms of your consciousness. You don't bear a responsibility to carry those thought structures as you move forward through time. And if you carry those thought structures, eventually you're not going to be able to move through time anymore because they're friction. That those thought structures are what is preventing eternal life and causing people to hit the membrane of death. It's like, mommy and daddy died, grandpa died, great-grandpa died, you're going to die too. You can let go of that baggage. You can let go of that structure, and you can say, no, actually, all of those people died. They didn't have the capacity to erase out of their DNA what is not wanted and write a new story, to write a new narrative. What we have, the basic idea is we now have this capacity to write a new narrative. And I don't need to freak anybody out, but yeah, your DNA is the battlefield. Your DNA is the place where these malevolent occupiers of the interstices occupy. And it's also the place where divine consciousness occupies. So all of this is about the personal refinement process of aligning with the characteristics, thoughts, and feelings and possibilities that are divine, that keep us going through time, and sending all of the rest to entropy. And sending to entropy means freezing them, taking energy away from them, like a giant vacuum cleaner. I'm going to suck the energy out of those beings. I'm not going to give energy to them, and I'm going to send that energy where it is supposed to go. That is what I do with Flying Rainbow Lasagna. Let's say it is the cosmic vacuum cleaner, the cosmic, cleaning system that sucks the energy away from the places where it's not supposed to be. Because we have energetic bleed through. We have stuff that's bleeding through into the interstices that's not supposed to be there. Supernatural residues. This is what like ghosts are. This is what, a lot of these supernatural reverberations, they're like echoes through time, and they're not supposed to be there. They're actually, that's like if you are playing music, you're like, we're hearing feedback. What are we hearing? We don't want to hear that echo. That echo is from 6,000 years ago. That echo is from 600 years ago. We don't need that personality characteristic to keep on walking in the same circles and trying to be alive. And I think that that's what some of those practices that were aberrant from ancient Egypt were about. Like, why should that guy that lived 3,000 years ago, why should that consciousness continue? What was so great about that guy? Because if you're really great, then you don't need to be mummified to be eternal. That's the whole point. Like, if you need technology to be uploaded somewhere to be eternal, like, you're not that great. The greatest musicians are supposed to keep staying alive and keep playing. And the not good musicians are supposed to atrophy and fall off along the way. And eventually what we have is just this amazing divine symphony, this amazing divine band. And then, we were saying in level 1, many people were expressing their, like, we're a bit tired. It's been a very grueling marathon. It's been very challenging. There's been a lot of friction. Yeah, it gets a lot easier when you get rid of all the crappy band members, when the people that are like when you get rid of the echoes, you get rid of the people that are not playing well, and you get rid of all of the beings that lost their own instruments, they don't have their own bodies, and they're trying to use your body. It gets a lot easier. So that's, you know, the best encouragement that I can give for right now. So if I open the floor to any more questions, if there's anything else that I can say on this topic. If not, I'm going to wrap it up for the moment. So, but I just want to give everybody the opportunity to say anything if they need to say anything. Joelle says, yeah, I feel like that too. Feels like timelines are shifting faster and faster, like constant edits are happening. Yes, I will confirm that for you. First of all, I feel like my day is on fast forward. I feel like time is moving incredibly fast, and like every day is 100 years. Like when I think that only happened this morning, but this, 8 hours have gone by, it feels like much more is being packed into each day. And that also includes self-development. Like something might happen in the morning, and by lunchtime or whatever, it's like, okay, I've processed that happened in the morning, that conversation happened, and now I'm on to the next thing. Like things that might used to have taken many days or weeks to get through to understand, it's like, okay, boom, we're done. Because it's like we're when I work in my studio, it's like, oh my God, I have to vacuum the floor. Oh my God, I have to clean this up. Oh, I have to clean this up. Now everything's finally clean. Now I can finally start doing creative work. We are doing cosmic house cleaning. And it's like, we need to just clean house, and then we can finally get around to the fun stuff of creating with our minds. So this is an opportunity to do accelerated cosmic cleaning. Clean it up. Clean up all of the loose ends, clean up all of the doubts and insecurities and guilt and shame and anything that has been hanging around for a very long time, so that we can finally get to the joyous co-creation experience. And that's what, when I was saying flying rainbow lasagna and the experience of doing this, when I actually do the dance, it is the easy part of my day. It is incredibly joyous. It is incredibly free. I don't have all of the concerns of my ordinary daily waking consciousness, like paying my electric bill or whatever, getting my car registration, or any of those silly license plate things, any of those things that are what people would call the mundane world. That stuff is the hard part. Doing impossible magical things with my DNA, that part is the easy, fun part. And it gets easier and more fun the more that we do cosmic house cleaning and get rid of these pesky entropic beings that are not even supposed to be here. So now let me get that. There were some more wonderful comments. Joelle asks, do you think we're resolving karma faster? My answer is yes, I do. And we can speed up our development now. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think this whole idea of karma has been relatively distorted, because it's not supposed to be that you can defer at all. Everything is supposed to be instantaneous. You get what you give instantaneously. It's not supposed to be like, oh, you get what you give in 5 years, in 10 years, in 5 lifetimes, in 10,000 years. It's supposed to be right now. So I'm seeing karma absolutely accelerating to be instantaneous. And that's also part of that realization, I am God. I am God. I'm God talking to myself. I'm God interacting with myself. All of this is all happening like at one moment in real time. Golden Hawk says, thanks for all the divine intel, Aurora. Your timing is truly perfect. I'm happy to do it. Let me drink some water here. I'm absolutely happy to do it. And it's it is wonderful to not be on my own on this journey, and it is wonderful to be playing with other good musicians, and that means other people that also have their own sense of divinity, sharing good ideas and feeling love reflected back to me. Like that's a big part of it. You send out love, and then you feel that love reflected back instantaneously. That's instant karma. Like that song, instant karma's gonna get you. So Alicia Marie says, will this work on our physical selves? Absolutely. There's really at this point no distinction between our physical selves and our non-physical selves. Through flying rainbow lasagna, you could say, hey, this point represents physical self and this point represents non-physical self. And we're constantly jumping back and forth between those 2 points until there's no distinction between those 2 levels of our consciousness. Joelle says, is flying rainbow lasagna going to get us on the main middle timeline back to the source? That is my intention, absolutely. Once this was invented, this is like not a shortcut, but a way to redirect. Like many of us have been like far afield, not on the central timeline, not where we really need to be. And this is what you can use. You don't actually have to go through all of those footsteps, trudging along through every single possible timeline until you get to the right timeline. Jump to the right timeline. That's what this is. And I'm making a little prediction, but it's not like a prediction set in stone. But my prediction is that we will, at a certain point, be able to instantaneously jump to the right timeline where we all are in a state of perfect health. our planet is in a state of perfect health. We have social, like equality, like, you know what I'm talking about, like all of these social disruptions are gone of the economy and politics and all of that. We can jump there instantaneously. Someone made a great comment on Facebook today. It was the question of discontinuity. Like, hey, if you're in a dream, you can be like, oh, first I was driving my car and then I was at a donut shop buying donuts. And it's okay if you're in a dream, but if you're in the mundane reality, you're like, oh, I'm driving my car and then I need to actually remember parking my car, walking through the parking lot, and then I'm in the donut shop. So sometimes the rational mind has this question of discontinuity, that maybe you can just jump from this timeline directly over to this timeline that you want to be on, but your rational mind says, wait a minute, how did I get here? That's not possible. I'm not allowed to do that. So you need like a prop, like a doorway. Like, oh, I had to first open the doorway and then I walked through into a new experience. So that doorway can be anything, like a portal. It can be anything. It can be a literal doorway. It can be a sense of being picked up by a UFO and then flown to a new place. It can be a sense of like put into a time capsule and then you woke up 20,000 years later and everything was different. I'm just thinking of different science fiction based, possibilities, but that's the idea. It is an integument for your mind, a thing that ties together where you were before to where you are now. So for some people, that integument is death or destruction. Or for some people, it's like Jesus comes out of the sky and then everything is fine. But I'm telling everyone, like, we can write a much better story of the doorway, that the doorway doesn't have to be planetary destruction and then the diamond jubilee and everyone is great. It can be a different story, but I recognize that the rational mind needs that. Like children need the fantasy being told to them, like, once upon a time this happened. Your mind needs to be told, oh, you used to be sick and lying in bed, but then this magical thing happened and now you are healthy and walking around. And that discontinuity of the mind often makes it difficult to jump directly to the state of pure health and pure, well-being. So I believe that those states exist. We could simply jump there directly, but that we just need to have a little bit of a narrative structure that tells us how do we get from point A to point B and helps us to remember being there. So Joelle says, that's what mainstream science is trying to do. They're trying to get us to play by their rules and believe that things we can imagine are impossible. They have no continuously control the imagination. I totally know what you're talking about. So yeah, what if we're playing by those rules, then we could say, okay, we invent a magic machine. I used to be here sick in bed, but once I invented the magic machine, now I am healthy and well. I'm on this timeline. Or Earth used to be horribly polluted, but then I invented the magic machine, and now Earth is nice and clean. Or any of those types of things. So this is like you come up with the portal, the story, the narrative integument that is necessary to bring us from where we were in the story to a new level of reality. And that's that leap from one level of electron excitation to the next level of electron excitation. And it doesn't have to be death. That's like the final, I'm going to wrap it up for today. I'm very tired. My voice is very tired. But that is the final takeaway, is that narrative integument does not have to be the portal of death. It can be a different type of portal. It can be some amazing, magical, fun, joyous, comfortable, or even ecstatic experience. It doesn't have to be something that is unpleasant at all. It doesn't have to be suffering is what I'm trying to say. Pedro says, Aurora, your teachings are increasing our energy to jump to the next level. Woohoo! That is exactly my intention with all of this. So I have lots and lots of energy. Yes, thank you. All really good questions and insight this whole session. This is why I do this. It's like if you live on a farm and you get to eat lots of good food every day and lots of fresh milk every day because you live on a farm. And you're like, look at that poor guy. He lives in a city. He never gets fresh milk. Like, that's what I feel like. I feel like with Flying Rainbow Lasagna, I connect to this wonderful energy all the time. And then I'm like, I want to share it with everyone else. I want everyone to be able to have this wonderful, good nourishment. And then everybody gets to benefit from it. So yeah. And then the more nourishment you get, the more you can Flying Rainbow Lasagna on your own. Like, you get your own cow, you get your own farm, you get your own direct connection to divinity and to all of this, like changing your DNA. And then it becomes possible to have, I want everybody to be happy and fun and comfortable and have a joyous experience. I don't want people to be suffering. And that's also part of this non-duality. And Patricia says, sun gazing has really, really helped. That is huge. Yeah, that's a big part of my daily diet and my daily practice. And I'm lucky, it's intentional. It's not just lucky. I live someplace where there's sun all the time so that I can do that. So yeah, ingesting sun directly through here. Touch the sun with your attention. Reach out to the sun and have that energy flow into you. And then all of your energy also is able to interact with the sun, because maybe the sun really deeply, deeply cares about you as its creation and offspring. and wants to know, hey, what's going on with Patricia down there? What's going on with Joelle today? Connect with the sun. What's going on with Bruce today? All of these individuals are all part of this stellar network. And it's like, give them a call. Like call your mom. Call your mom. Call the sun. Tell them what's going on in your life. And then you also get a wonderful home cooked meal. And this is also part of how we transform the planet, independent of any type of external politicians, religious leaders. No savior from the sky is necessary. Like, this is literally transformative. And the more people that do it, the more things get transformed. So I'm going to sign off for right now, but I'm really so appreciative for everyone who has participated, who shares their insights and intention, who's on the journey. We're running this marathon, and I'm telling you, we're really getting someplace. And like mile 25 is really hard. Like, it's hard. Let's keep going, drink some Gatorade, like encourage one another. I do that all the time. People encourage me, and then I encourage other people. We keep each other going. We don't have to be just doing this in a vacuum in your own way without touching on anyone else. And also, no one else does it for you. Like, we encourage each other, but you all paint your own paintings, but you're like, hey, that painting is looking great. You're doing great. Keep going. This is how we do it. So thank you very much to everybody, because you absolutely, yes, thank you. I'm very happy to be part of the journey. Yes. So I love you too. Thank you. I'm sending love right back. Really, love is like a real food, and when people send me love, I really feel it. So yeah, and especially like if anybody is ever, if you have health problems or whatever crises, people sending love and prayers, it's a very real food. It really helps and improves things. You're welcome. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you. So let me end things for right now, and please, we'll continue to dance like flying rainbow lasagnas. Thank you. I love you too. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. Wonderful. I'm very appreciative. Thank you. All right. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Oh, you know what? Let me